So we were just talking about the fear of succeeding, the fear of
Mm.
receiving your dreams, and then is that like what is that? Is it that you have nothing more to conquer, or you're lost, you don't have direction, or is it too much, or what is the problem there?
I think for me, it's that I have kind of like almost two personalities. And one personality is very, very happy and content in their surroundings, in going along with the flow and just taking in life and genuinely what, I think most people strive for. And then this other kind of like personality is always searching to improve and to be better and, all these other things. And they're just at war. So constantly, I'm wanting more and then I'm kind of getting more and then I'm like, right, I'm happy where I am. This is really nice. And then time goes on and I want a little bit more. And I think that it's easy to forget how far you've come, to forget your surroundings and take in kind of the goodness in your actual life and to constantly be dreaming for more. But at the same time, I don't think the personality that wants to stay the same is correct either because we as human beings should grow and should like keep evolving. So it's just a constant war between the two. And I think it's definitely, yeah, a fear of getting what I think I want and then it not be as good as I thought and you can't go back a lot of the time. So that's I think a lot of what blocks me from the success that I dream of having because I just have all these kind of, you know, things cropping up, which is frustrating.
Yeah, it sounds like disappointment. It sounds like that we build up illusions about how an accomplishment will make us feel, and it's almost like a placebo. It's like the anticipatory um, hallucination that you think that all you really want is this chocolate cake, and you're hoping and you're dreaming like, oh, when I get to the end of this, I'm gonna get this reward. It's this chocolate cake, and then you eat it, and then afterward you feel a bit sick, and you're like, oh, that wasn't as good as I imagined it to be, and so it would have been better if I just had a small slice. But getting everything that you want, getting the entire chocolate cake, it's almost gluttonous. It's like too much. Um,
Mm,
and it does seem to be a unique problem. I'm not sure about this, but there, like, most of human history, I think we could look back and, look at pictures. So one of the things I'm thinking about is there was this in the early 20th century in some village in Belarus. Somebody went around with a camera and was just taking pictures of the villagers and how they lived life and what they did, from funeral services to like the little plays that they would put on, and the masks that they would wear. And I was looking at the masks and I was like, this reminds me a lot of, I go to an art museum or a history museum and I see African masks. Like they're of a similar craftsmanship and they emote in a similar way. I mean,
mm,
ancient Greeks also had masks in drama, and so it's like there's this convergent evolution of when people don't have access to computers and television and AI and all the sources of entertainment we have now, or they're maybe largely illiterate, so they can't even read a book or a novel or something like that. So how do you get entertainment? It's like people find entertainment in these masks, which now we think of as silly, or how could you even there's this interesting thing. I mean, I think if we look at the lives of children, so like the iPad kid is like a kid who's put in front
mm,
of this iPad and it's just constant stimulation of flashing colors, and then it's a saturation, it's a hyperstimulation. And
mm,
so then if you take that kid and you put them in front of a beautiful mountain or a stream or like something that is meaningful or that we would think of as the wonder of the world, that they might go back to the iPad. Like they might prefer the
Yeah, they're
iPad
not first.
to reality. So there's a way in which you'd say like, well, I want to be entertained, I want to be stimulated, I want my life to be full of all these good things, but then you achieve those things and it's super saturation to the point where you become numb to it and you're not able to enjoy it. So you lose the sensitivity
Mm,
that you might have to the Belarusian villagers who are putting on a play with masks. They find that entertaining. We would not be able to find that entertaining. Um, so it's, I don't know. It seems like, capitalism creates a machine whose goal is to satisfy demand. But there's
mm.
this paradox of satisfying demand that you get to weird spaces where you've changed the nature of the consumer, that our demands, our needs, our desires are not static, but they are continuously evolving in feedback with what we receive or the experience that we have in our lives. So it's not that it's like, well, I objectively want this many calories, and then if I get this many calories, I will be satisfied. It's like, well, once I have that, then I'm going to want more. But then we're sort of, there is a biological nature to humanity as well, where it's like, well, we're built for a certain number of calories, and if calories to basically exercise ratio, and if you mess with that ratio, it might feel good the first couple days or something, but eventually you create a lifestyle that is unsustainable. So
Yeah, you're more likely to die from obesity nowadays than you are to die of starvation, which would
I think that's
surprise people.
global, and that's
Yeah.
crazy because I mean there are still people who are dying of starvation, but there are
Mm.
just so many people on the other side who are dying of obesity that and I think that's only within the last couple of years that we've hit that point, but it also
Yeah.
seems to be continuing in that direction. Like it seems like um, we're
We we have an abundance issue. We are we are like creating at a enormous rate, and I think only in the pandemic did we ever kind of experience any form of scarcity in the Western, and obviously this is me talking from being in the UK and stuff, like, so obviously that's different where you are, but personally, when the UK, it was the first time a lot of people were going into supermarkets and, oh, there's no chicken today, oh, there's no meat, so what am I actually going to eat? And people were shocked to the core. So I think yeah, it's a crazy world we live in because it's just this machine that just keeps going and going and going, which I guess is capitalism. That's what it's built to do. Um, but we're insatiable. We'll always find something, and then we'll lose sight of what we had, and the joys of simple pleasures are lost. And that's, I think, one of the most incredible things that we need to hold on to is just being able to go outside, go for a walk, not have all this stimulation, not have to have like the newest iPhone and the newest car and stuff. But yeah, that's like a whole mindset change that I think needs to be societal. It can't just, it's hard to do it on an individual basis because we're all looking at each other. uh,
Yeah, I think that looking at each other, the social competition and the status is extremely powerful. And for me, that's what I feel. I feel like I'm not actually tempted when I analyze and I'm like, okay, what am I consuming here and why am I consuming it? Am I consuming it like even going back to when I was a kid and I would read a lot of books. And
mm,
and I would stay up all night reading books. Like I didn't have an iPhone or whatever. I didn't have those forms of entertainment, but I would just voraciously read books. And I was thinking about that in relationship with introversion and extroversion. So if you just like, you're just a kid by yourself and you're reading books, okay, that's we describe that as introverted. But then if you look inside the mind of somebody who's reading that book and the way in which they're reading the book, a book to me, it's a voyeuristic experience about, and they're fictional people, but you are looking into the lives of these people and you are
Mm.
trying to understand them, and you're there with them, and you're empathizing or sympathizing with their victories and their defeats, and you're vicariously experiencing life through these fictional characters. You're projecting your ego onto these fictional characters. So when they win the battle, you feel good, and when they lose the battle, you feel bad. So it impacts the reader emotionally to project themselves into that world. Um, so, you know, I kind of have this question with video games too. It's like video games can be really hard and they can take a lot of time. And when you look at
Mm.
people who play video games, it's like a job, It's like I I'm gonna go
Oh yeah.
home and I'm gonna put in a few hours of work, and sometimes depending on the game, you might say, okay, what are you doing in this game? It's like, well, I have to do this task. And it's like, well, that doesn't look very exciting. They're like, no, it's not. This is a grind. I'm grinding right now. And I
Yeah.
think that's where,
Grinding.
like, the term grind
Those
set as a meme for like, oh, I'm going to go on my grind set. I'm going to make all this money. It's like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I think video game players, they used to talk about grinding. So I think that's probably where it comes from, or it's a convergent evolution of language. The
I
grind
was
set.
talking to someone on TikTok about RuneScape. I don't know whether you ever played RuneScape,
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's just chopping wood. Like,
I had
so
99 wood cutting. Just saying.
I tried to get into my RuneScape the other day after the conversation we had, but I've completely I can't find it, and it's really sad because I have no idea what my stats were. But judging by how I live my life now, I'm pretty sure I had quite because when COVID, I played Breath of the Wild, and I did about 200 hours on Breath of the Wild, and I'd barely even done a quarter of the map because I was just doing every little side quest. I'd stand on the corner of mountains and just look out onto the. I mean, it was a dark time in the pandemic, so you didn't have much else to do, but like cooking and stuff. And people would come in and be like, "You still cooking?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're gonna make them meals."
Yeah, I haven't played Breath of the Wild, but I have played Minecraft, and I think
Mm.
that's another one where you're asking like, what are people getting out of this? Why are people so attracted to this? It is
The
a
Sims as well.
Yeah, Sims. They're all getting at something slightly different. Like I think with Sims, I never played Sims, but to me, the appeal, like sometimes I'll like start talking about social experiments. Like, what if we took 1,000? Like one of the things I'll talk about with my friend is because he's lived in 3 different countries, and there's this um there's this park in San Diego you can go to. At each house in the park, it has a different country as its theme, and you can go and you can talk to
Oh,
people from that country. You talk to people from Israel, from Russia, from Hungary, from Slovakia, and each house is a different country with like natives from that country in the house to talk to. So
oh,
it's like a
wow.
it's like a little mini touristy experience. And I was like, what if we expanded this? What if we like instead of having one house, what if we had an entire village just dedicated to a country, but it was all within like a single city area, and you could just go from village to
Mm.
village, and you could watch people like making traditional meals and doing dances or whatever, and wouldn't that be? And so that's almost like the spirit I think that the Sims is getting at, is like you're becoming the social administrator, and you are setting up. It's almost like farming. It's almost like having
Mm.
like cows or chickens or goats, and it's like a petting zoo. It's like I'm going to set up these little
Yeah.
humans in my petting zoo, and then I'm going to be the overseer, and I'm going to be the overlooker, and I'm going to have this sense of power and control that comes from being able to like
Mm.
tweak my little children. And then and it's kind of interesting, like with parenting, the way people interact with that, because a lot of times people will propose like family life as the virtuous, authentic, genuine rejection of the consumer experience, of the desire economy. And it's like, no, it's like the parent child relationship is the sacred, inviolable thing that is always unambiguously good and never has any of these like narcissistic tendencies. But I think, a lot of people would understand that maybe the reality is more gray, and the
Mm,
way in which people parent, I think, can be influenced by, okay, well, I want my kid to be, I want to cultivate them. Like I'm the gardener and the child is like the plant. And so I'm going to weed away their bad behaviors. And then I'm going to sort of water them with these good things. And I'm going to like make them do these little dances. And so you have kids doing all these sports and they're doing all these extracurriculars. I mean, we have a politician who made a point saying, like, the reason America's falling behind India and China is because we have too many sleepovers and not enough study sessions. And so the idea was like that Americans should be more, we should put in more hours as adults, but also as children. Children need to be working more. Children need to be more professional and more focused on their resume and their future and all of these things, because that's what these other countries are doing. And if we don't win that war, then I guess something terrible is going to happen. And it's like, I mean, I understand the idea of like, okay, well, there are these global geopolitical conflicts and you want your country to win because you don't want, you think the other countries are evil and you don't want to take it. It's like this Cold War attitude. And I like
yeah.
get that. But then there's also an aspect of like, what actually would happen if we all just, as you said, it's difficult as an individual to say, like, you know what, I'm not going to force my kid to do extracurriculars they don't want to do for the resume, for the college application. I'm going to just drop out of that process and kind of let them do what they want to do. And if it turns out that they want to go off to college or they want to become an accountant or a banker or a doctor or a lawyer, it's like I will allow them to do that, but I'm not going to try to force that upon them. The problem is that then everyone else looks at you and there's like this collective implicit judgment. And in order to resist that,
Mm.
you kind of have to be somewhat of like, I don't know if narcissist is the right word, but you have to be kind of arrogant. Like you have to be like, everyone else is wrong and I'm right.
Everyone else is wrong and I am right. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's hard because as parenting, I used to nanny as well. So I've seen a lot of different, it was temp nannying as well. So it meant that you kind of come into these families and see the dynamic. And it was crazy to see how the minor parenting, well, lack of parenting in some cases can really affect a child, and how many kids that I would meet at about 4 to 7, and I knew off the bat that unless anything happens, that kid is like not is fucked. That kid is not um like they are rewarded with gifts even when they're kind of doing tantrums, or like just little minor things that people don't really think about that further along the line really affects these kids, and it's just it's really hard for parents to kind of see what kind of decisions they need to be making and what things they can micromanage and what things they can't, because you decide that you don't want to give your kid a phone because of how you think about social media, but then you send them to a school where everyone else has a phone. So how are you meant to have that ego of like I'm right and I know I'm doing the best thing, but you can't actually control what other people are doing. And that politicians talking about, oh, this country, you know, they have more focus on study, but in a lot of those countries, you have a lot of issues where the kids felt so pressured by their parents to do things that they end up dropping out of things, or they have a really bad relationship with their family. And in societies where you aren't forcing these kids to pursue certain things from a young age, they might have a stronger family unit, they might have a stronger patriotism because of their communities are stronger in other ways. So it's hard to dictate where you think everything should go without that domino effect of what it's going to affect in kind of in the society as a whole. And also, like you said about the geopolitical situations in different countries. Like it's actually crazy to think how many decisions are made for us on the idea that they are bad, we are good, we can't collaborate with them. um there's no way forward unless we conquer that other person. And we're just here in the middle just trying to live our lives. It's like, I've never heard so much about China and about all these different countries, like the well, I'm rambling, but it is quite wild. When I was reading the AI 2027, did you read or know of
You
the
know, I
kind of
think Scott
vision thing?
Alexander kind of introduced that to his audience, and I can't read everything anyone
It's
writes, let alone Scott.
long.
Yeah, yeah.
It is long, but
I
it's
just try to take a vibe of everything that happens, and once I catch the vibe, I'm like, okay, I got the vibe. Moving on. Too much stuff.
yeah, it is long. But the thing that struck me the most was the kind of focus on America versus China, and how the world eventually kind of fell apart just because two massive kind of entities were just fighting against each other uh, in the race for AI. And you can see it now happening. Like, it's not going to come true the way that they predict, because as soon as you say something out loud, it doesn't happen anymore because the blueprint is already there. So people are going to actively not be doing that. But I think a basic, well, I think a general lack of compassion and empathy and stuff is what will be the death of all of us, to be honest. Like, and not, we have a lot of talk about immigration in the UK and in the USA as well. Um, and as soon as someone meets someone or understands the whole picture of something, they go, "Oh, okay, well, I kind of understand that what your situation is like." And it's a shame that people can't come to that decision before they're faced with kind of direct examples of other cultures. And the more people, like you said, if you go to these villages where you go into a different house and you speak to someone from another country, and the amount of people who don't even have a passport to even go to another country to see what they live like, or to see what their culture is like, it's quite detrimental to the way that we run our societies, because there will always be this them versus us situation, I think.
Yeah, I think that the them versus us mentality, um, it's very well. I view it almost as a intersection of sex and violence, in that um, there's a very deep animalistic possessiveness about territory, and especially over
Mm,
women. I think for men, this instinct, I'm not saying women can't act this way as well, especially when it comes to children. It's like,
mm,
we need to protect our children against these foreign people. I think that's generally how it manifests for women. I think for men, it's very much focused on, we need to protect our women from these foreign people. And then you kind
mm,
of get this feedback loop. Not, and I don't think it's about, a lot of social phenomenon don't require a large percentage of the population to drive society. So
mm,
OnlyFans, as an example, the number of women on OnlyFans as a percentage of the population is pretty small. But if
mm.
you ask a lot of men, like, what do you think is wrong with women today? If you frame the question in that way, I think you'd get a lot of them saying, well, it's OnlyFans. And it's like, well, wait a
Yeah.
second. 99% of women are not on OnlyFans. How can you say that is what is wrong with women as a category, if not even, and a majority of women are not using it? How does that make sense? But
I think, sorry to jump in, but I think speaking about that situation and territory, and I think that a lot of uh or actually, I can't really speak for men, can I? But but I would understand that maybe when you're saying about protecting women, it's they're kind of protecting the idea of women, and they're protecting the idea of their children and their daughters, and they see it as a problem not because it is a large cross section of what women are doing, but more that they don't want the women that they pursue, or the children and daughters they have, to think that it is a viable option because that's what they're against. So I guess that's how that territory must come across, because that actually, now I think of it, that makes much more sense than, them being against the 1%. They're actually probably more against the spreading of the, because a lot of people are now coming out and having to do articles like, please don't do this if you want to have this kind of life, that it's not as, it's not as good as it looks. The expectation is a lot different, and you can't take that away. There's a lot of uh, it's a hard conversation though, because I think for some women, that is in their mind, that is all they have to offer, and they are only capitalizing on what they have been given in life, especially if they come from a background where they don't have many opportunities, and they're able to feel like they can pull themselves out of something, then that's when they pursue something like that. But it's a tricky one at the end of the day, and I think people will always be on different sides of that conversation. But yeah, you're right. A lot of these issues that are troubling people are in the minority. Like, if you bring it over to kind of trans activists and trans rights, and the kind of gendered bathrooms and stuff, and a lot of people who are against it are kind of against this idea of men just turning up in women's bathrooms. But if you actually went through the data of how many times that has probably happened, it's probably a lot lower than the amount of times that trans or anyone of LGBT has been attacked in a kind of bathroom or something. So I guess it's this kind of scaremongering of the loudest voices, and my personal opinion is, if a man is going to attack me, he's probably going to attack me anywhere he wants. I've been followed across London in broad daylight. Uh, so if people want to murder you, they will. Uh, a bathroom's not going to stop them. But that's my personal experience of that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I've witnessed that a lot on dating apps where people will say, it's like I'd rather not have 1,000 text conversations. I'd rather just meet somebody in person. I think that's really the only way you know anything about a person on a romantic level.
Mm.
I don't believe in text based romance. I think is a video game. But then a response is like, well, how do I know you're not a serial killer? How do I know you're not a murderer? And it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, like you said, you go to Starbucks, or you have to go to the grocery store. I assume there could be serial killers in the grocery store, and they could follow you to your car, and then they could follow you back
Mm.
to your house. I mean, we do live in
So
a
you're just never gonna date, like.
yeah. I mean, but I think it's interesting as a statement, because I think when you dissect it, what you find is that what people really fear is emotional risk. More and,
Mm.
and physical risk is communicated explicitly, because communicating emotional risk is more difficult and more painful, because if you say, I fear you're going to kill me, everyone kind of knows that's a lie, and everyone kind of understands that's something that you say, but underneath it, it's kind of a euphemism for, well, I'm afraid that if we met in person, I don't know enough about you to know whether or not you'd reject me, and it would be devastating to me if we were on a physical date and then you said, I don't really like you, and you left me, or if you stood me up, or any of these number of things. And so I think people are very sensitive and they are very anxious about emotional harm, and oftentimes they use a lie about physical harm because explaining that emotional harm makes themselves vulnerable, and they don't want to be vulnerable. That's what they're trying to avoid. So in the case of like a trans bathroom, it's like it's not so much that people feel I don't. I mean, they're saying, "Oh, I fear that someone's going to go into the women's bathroom and assault people there." But I think underneath that is an emotional fear about, um, the idea of womanness in itself being socially
Claimable.
encroached upon.
Mm, yeah, definitely. And I know lots of people in my life that are from like a different generation, and they did a lot of work for feminism in like right through the 70s and 80s. So um their opinions on kind of that subject are always going to be in the defense of women, and they have a very I've had to have very strong conversations about that. But I have trans friends, and I have um people like friends from that community. So I'm always going to have my opinions, but I think it's always important to listen to people's emotions and listen to people's fears, um to actually, like you said, get to the bottom of the actual problem, rather than just reacting to the outward, I'm going to get attacked or someone's going to kill me kind of thing, because that's when the conversation breaks down. That's when people get aggressive, and they're actually there. Everyone feels the same way. Everyone's just feeling the same thing, and the more you can listen to someone and understand why they're thinking something and why they're feeling that way, the more chance that either they might change their mind, or they might not even change their mind, but we might be able to live in better harmony with each other, because it is a struggle. I think people not being able to communicate their actual feelings is one of the hardest battles that we're facing right now online, because all the nuance is lost, and people who seemingly on actually the same side, they're just arguing without actually listening to anything that anyone is saying. Um,
That the all of these different issues, there is a like for the what my perspective is that when it comes to immigration and trans issues, these are very, I mean, even again, as you're saying, going back to the 1970s, the people who were self-styled radicals, and they're like, we want a radically different society. We want a society that has never been seen before. Some people have this, like Maria Gimbutas is an anthropologist who kind of proposed that Europe used to be a matriarchal society, and there's like replies to that. But, whether you think that the ancient world was matriarchal or whatever, it's like clearly 2,000 years of Christianity, we've had patriarchal societies. Now people are saying, well, we want something completely different, something that people cannot even conceive of. It's a new idea. And then within a few decades of that radical transformation, for a new crop of people to say, like, well, actually, we're kind of revolutionizing biological sex or through these physical interventions, and so everything that you worked for, now we're going to turn that upside down. And then the original people who are like, well, we still like patriarchy, now they're even more mad.
yeah,
So, you had three
yeah.
groups of people who were mad at each other. And, I guess my perspective is that the individual decisions and the individual choices, like the going back to like first wave feminism of women should have the right to vote and have property and
Mm,
work and be able to read and write and be educated and not have to have children if they don't want to have children, that they should have access to basic contraception even before abortion. That first wave of feminism uh, clearly radically changed society in a number of ways, and it's been um, I think if you compared that to whether it's trans or sex positive feminism, like the OnlyFans stuff or whatever, you compare these different things, it's like clearly ideologically and emotionally, if you put these people in a room, they don't agree with each other. And so I view the way in which these various ideologies proceed from one another as an unconscious process where the first wave feminists, I don't think, could have predicted that their activism would then lead to forms of activism that would be
Mm.
alien to them. But we can look back retrospectively and see how this was a precondition for this.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's like an unconscious process there that I think is ultimately, um, if I had to give it a larger teleology, I would say that there is um, I guess I would call it a form of speciation in the sense of, in biology, if you take a bird and you put it on the Galapagos Islands, Darwin's theory of evolution, he looked at these different birds and he said, well, they have all these different beaks that are specialized for these different jobs, but they all originate from their descendants, or they descend from this original bird who accidentally ended up on the island because it flew there, from 1,000 miles
Mm.
away. And so I kind of view that as what's happening culturally is that we had this original culture, where these feminist movements got started, Anglo-American culture, whatever. Um, and then as material conditions began to change, as new horizons were opened and people got like, people started being able to very easily and cheaply get information from all around the world. The material conditions of our societies changed, and that opened up new space for people to try out different things that previously, if you don't have radio or you don't even have literacy, if you don't have access to information, then your imagination of what is possible is much smaller. Like when you start
Mm.
having people, they're able to read an Edgar Allan Poe story, or they're able to start experimenting with science fiction. They're able to envision like utopian societies with completely different norms. And then once you can imagine that in entertainment, then you can begin to project your desire. Well, actually, I would like to live in that society. I'd like to have that freedom and to
Mm.
experiment with that. So there's an opening of consciousness, and that opening of consciousness doesn't create like a harmonious, it's kind of like opening Pandora's box. Like it doesn't create like,
Yeah.
there's not just one answer to the opening of consciousness. It creates this cacophony of different voices that are all competing with each other and kind of scrambling over each other for power, because they do have this idea of like, well, it's not enough for me individually to change my behavior. We as a society as a whole together need to change our behavior, because it's only by collectively that we can achieve, the Sims universe that I want. So
Yeah.
everyone's competing with each other. And that process, then there's sort of two elements. There's a mimetic power. That's how appealing is your message to people, independent of the
Mm.
results of that message. So it's like the communism is the idea that, well, we hate rich people. Obviously, they suck. What if we got rid of them and then we would all have more money? That's an appealing message. Whether or not that works as an economic system is a different question. But you have a mimetic power, and then you do have ultimately the results of ideas. Okay, well, the Soviet Union had a certain system. That system ultimately fell apart, or the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia ultimately fell apart. So um, there are, I guess you could say, the mimetic power of an idea is its short-term attraction, and then you have like the long-term results of that idea. And I think what people are very afraid of is that as information becomes more open and quicker, and it's like when Charlie Kirk died, I wasn't even looking at it on social media, but people are coming up to me on the streets and being like, "Did you see this? Did you see
I
this?"
I had to Google who Charlie Kirk was. I am that much in my own kind of bubble, I guess you would say, that I didn't even know who that was, which is kind of wild to me. But that's for my own reasons because I stopped watching the news a while ago because I just thought like there was too, I feel like with I wanted to say though actually because I will go off on a tangent if I don't come back to it. But what you were saying about kind of different types of people with different ideologies, and I think that's kind of the problem we have with democracy right now. Um, is that it's very much in most places like a two-party state and two-party race. Um, and I think until we come to some way where we can start including multiple viewpoints, we will continue down this path of you know, disaster because at the end of the day, like you said, the more information that we're um that is available to us, the more viewpoints are kind of cropping up, and we're all kind of dice die, you know, we're all splitting away into different factions, and the more it's kind of there's just too many of them, and so our society cannot survive with just I choose this person and I believe absolutely everything that they say because, well, ultimately, there are bits of things that people say that I actually agree with, and there's bits of things that you say that I agree with. And until we can kind of start creating a kind of mishmash of things, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse because these people have like there are people who have completely opposing views that will never ever ever be happy. So if we have one or the other, it's just always going to be some kind of upset. Um, but yeah, I've forgotten what I was going to say, but that was what I said.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess optimally, I think that the ideal form of liberalism is one in which people have the freedom to construct basically their communities the way that they would like to. And so if somebody says, well, in my community, I don't want trans people in the bathroom. And then, I posted this thing that I think people find to be funny and entertaining. It is like a Sims game idea. But it's like I like the idea of there being a city, and everybody was
Yes, I
responding to
saw.
me. They were saying like, "Oh, have you ever been to this place and this place and this place?" I'm like, "Yes, I have." And those are not cities; those are like small towns and villages. They have like 11,000 people, and they're very touristy. And it's what I'm envisioning is like an entire society where people are all gay. What would that be like? And maybe it would be good, maybe it would be bad, maybe it would just be different. But I would be interested to see like how people when they are and how many gay people would prefer to live there, and maybe they would prefer to live elsewhere. Maybe they'd say, you know what, I'm gay, but I don't want to live in an all gay city. I want to live with straight people
Yeah,
too and other types of people. And then people are saying, well, what if there was a trans city? And I was like, well, it'd probably have to be more of a village because I don't know that there are enough trans people to form a city. But I mean, then the question is, how would that differ? And what are the preferences? How does that inform, our people? Obviously, we're talking about statistics and we're talking about averages and how people vote, um and then would you eventually get like different sectors and neighborhoods within the city of people who then split off and say, well, you know those gay people do things that, it's people are saying like, we're going to have the bear district and the twink district. And where would you prefer to live? Would you prefer to live with the bears or with the twinks? And I think I said I'd prefer to live with the bears. But then you have all these subsections, and so that to me is like it's like a silly example, but it is an ideal of the more freedom that we can tolerate and permit and give people to say that I want you to be able to experiment with your ideas in a way that isn't harming other people, but it gives you an opportunity to instantiate and live your dream. And maybe you find that once your dream is satisfied and you've reached that utopia, it's not everything it was cracked up to be. Maybe it's not actually what you wanted,
Exactly.
but you that's I think that's how we learn and how we experiment is we give people
Yeah,
opportunities to do that.
I think so, but the problem with a lot of that is there are there are a few different types of people, and some people are like, you know what you do. I don't care what you do as long as you just leave me to do what I want to do. But there are also a set of people who are like, it might be, I don't like what you're doing and I want to put a stop to it, or I I like where you are and I want that now. And I think that the problem with having this kind of sections of utopias and stuff is there will be, the community or city of these people who want to expand their city and they want to trample on other people's. um so this kind of the gay utopia doesn't stay a gay utopia because someone over there has decided that they like the land that that person's on. And so that's how we kind of come into these messes, is no matter what we do, there will always be people who can't leave other people alone, or that are so kind of egotistical that they think that their way is the only way, that they're like, well, you're wrong and I need to change your mind, and I need to spread the word of what my people do. And kind of it kind of falls on from there because people are like, well, I don't want to do what you do, why can't you just leave me alone? So that's, I guess, the ultimate problem, is that we'll just keep like going like that. But then again, who knows? You've got places like Switzerland that will seem to be going strong in their kind of way of doing things, and no one seems to be messing around. So who knows?
I do think that it requires a strong state um, to protect the rights of people to be different. If if the gay city doesn't have a military,
Yeah,
then there's going to be some invasions and people are going to come conquer it. So
yeah.
these experiments are there's a mutual I think there's a mutual relationship between state power and the rights of minorities. And I think historically, the first, I mean, some of the earliest like freedoms of religion came from the Persian, Darius the Great and the Persian Empire, because it
Mm,
was so big and it was so vast, it was so powerful that they were like, well, how do we govern all these people? Because we have Jews and we have Zoroastrians and we have other various religions, Baal and various gods. So how do we deal with that? Are we going to go around crushing everyone and genociding everybody and constantly going to war over religion? And they were like, what if we just tolerated religions?
just
What
let
if we
them
let everybody
be.
do their own thing? And that at the time was, I think, a fairly revolutionary idea. But I think that for me, I mean, imperialism is a dirty word because people conceive of it in the way that you're talking about it, which is the imperialism of saying, I don't like what my neighbor is doing. I'm going to go over there and force them to be like me, as opposed
Mm,
to what I think imperialism actually tends to be more than people would admit, is that it actually tends to be a force for uh, tolerance and universalism and saying, you know what, as a state, we don't have the resources to force everyone to be the same, and so instead we're going to establish rights that create good borders where it's like, the Jews are going to be allowed to be Jewish. They can't go and conquer their neighbors, but they can be themselves where they are. Now,
mm,
obviously, we've had many millennia since that point, and that has developed. But I think I think there's something true about that, which is that when you have a nationalist state like Germany in the 1930s was like, okay, we are Germans and we want a pure German state, and anyone who's not German needs to get the hell out. And our
Mm.
neighbors, um, we want to Germanize. We want to go into Poland, and we're going to purify that land so we can take it over, as opposed to like, the British Empire had all of these different, had India and it had South Africa and Rhodesia, it had all these places that were very different, but it said, it did not have that same um, desire or mode. I'm not saying that there wasn't any attempt by the British to make people speak English or to make people Christian,
Yeah.
but if you compare the two states at the time in that context, I think the British Empire was much more tolerant of, okay, well, we're not going to go and just try to make everyone English or something, even within Britain, right? Because it was Scotland, Wales, England, Northern
Mm.
Ireland,
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I think that um, that's how I contextualize America today as being that sort of empire, which is, there is no one American nation. There is no one American people. There are different peoples within America. There are different subsections. And it's because America is so powerful that model is able to persist. And once the state goes into crisis, you see this like in Yugoslavia or Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia, I should say, the Soviet Union, is that when the state becomes weak, people become more
Hmm.
nationalistic and they split off into their own
Yeah.
little tribes, and they fall back upon like, okay, well, if the state isn't strong and I don't believe in the state anymore, what do I believe in? Oh, I believe in my nation and my people. And
Mm.
that's when people become less tolerant and they start to go to war with each other. That's how you got Kosovo and and today in Ukraine, it's like that's kind of a fallout of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I think, to your point about like, people don't want to let people be themselves, and so how do you solve that problem? I think the only way you solve that is by having a really strong state with a monopoly on violence that says, you
Mm.
know, as much as possible, we're going to tolerate and protect the rights of minorities. If you have a problem with that, if you don't like the fact that those people over there are, organizing their community the way they want, well, tough luck. You don't have a say in that. So, I mean, that to me, again, that's the ideal. Now, in reality, um, we're pretty far away from that. We've never achieved that. I don't think we're ever really going to be able to achieve that perfect utopia. Because
Mm.
yeah, like that territorialism of people is very strong. It is like the collective ego of, my people and my women and my children. And there is it's like a deeply ingrained biological thing. So I don't think if we were to wipe that out, then we would look, humanity itself would not be the same. We would be like a different species at that point. We would be, because
Yeah.
you have like ants and bees, where most of the species does not reproduce. And so they're not talking about my wives and my kids. I mean, they don't talk at all, but I'm
Mm.
in a metaphorical sense, the worker ants and the worker bees are not interested in their own reproduction. They're interested in the reproduction of the queen.
Green. Yeah.
So that, but I think there's something ultimately that the difference in kind of like the my family and my wife and my kids versus like, um, the polar opposite, or what happens when you remove those impulses, is you do get, on a biological level in the animal kingdom, that looks androgynous, and it looks like this kind of centralized, collectivistic, very hierarchical, almost like a caste-based society. That's kind of what India has, as a culture historically. It's a very rigid caste system with a few people at the top, um,
Mm.
very universalistic in terms of Indian religion. Uh, it's like a very and it's all about like even before Buddhism, it's like you have to let go of your desire, and there's a lot of praise of like celibacy and not being sexual and kind of being meditating and being out of the world. So, and I think that even goes back further than people think with like the Upanishads. I think that ethos of not being egoic, not trying to get what's best for you. I think there's a
Mm.
mutualistic relationship between that worldview and the actual practical problem of like you have an empire with a bunch of people who disagree. How are you going to herd those cats together? Having people at the top, the Brahmin, who are like celibate and they're meditating and they're sort of detached from the world. I think that is like the tone that has to be set in order to filter down to the lowest ranks of society to say like, okay, well, um, I'm no longer thinking of myself as from a selfish point of view. I'm thinking of myself in terms of like what are my duties and my responsibilities and being
Yeah.
conscientious.
Yeah. I think that's true. And I think that's, I guess, the problem in like a kind of capitalist state is everyone is trying to climb their way to the top. And I think unless you uh, start pulling in little bits from different cultures and different kind of um, belief systems, and like you want to like cherry pick a little bit of communism and cherry pick a little bit of socialism, like instead of it being like kind of one predominant belief system, because I think that um a little bit of spirituality goes a long way, but not too much. Uh, like I feel like not everyone is kind of equipped to be, celibate and full monk. Although I was celibate for a year, and it did change my perspective on life, on people, on dating, on me as a person. And I think I've seen a lot of people doing stuff like that, and I think it does change you internally because you kind of sever uh that tie with the animal within you that's kind of controlled by desire and about how you're perceived by others and your need for attention and your worth as well, because you're separating your worth from something that's apparently so natural, which obviously it is natural, but I think that a lot of people are too governed by that kind of animal within them that they lose sight of well, everything, life, their minds. So yeah, I would highly recommend like a bout, but it has to be intentional though. Obviously, it can't be it can't be just through lack of trying. It really needs to be a kind of a step back from that kind of thing. It does make a difference, I think. I guess that's why you have the whole involuntary celibate issue that is still also a very minor part of society, but has been blown up to be this thing that is scaring the living daylights out of a lot of people. When really, if we all just stepped outside and had a coffee with each other, I think life would be a lot better. I think a lot of the issues that we have as society are community based. I think are we're detaching ourselves from what has essentially been the backbone of us as a human species. We're now in an age where you can get absolutely anything you want from your bed. You don't need to, which is great if you're obviously disabled or, whatever, you can't do that. But for people who are able bodied, to be able to literally have an AI companion who tells you they love you, and then they will order you food to your bed, and you never need to leave. You never need to. check out what's going on outside or see other people's viewpoints, and you can sit in your little Facebook group, if people still have Facebook, where everyone shares the same photos and memes and they all comment on things, and it appears to be a great place to be. It appears to be a safe place for them to be, but is actually a very detrimental uh, space to live in. I think I did used to suffer from a lot of depression and not leaving the house after the pandemic. So I think that I have a few of those uh habits still like lurking at the back that I'm trying to kick out of, because I think getting outside and getting connecting with people is really really hard when you've been stuck inside and you feel safe, and you know, talking about like dating and stuff and how you don't want it to be text based and it's best to see people in person. But I think a lot of people have been kind of shot in the foot by the changes in society now. You know, you can't hold a door open for someone without them being offended. You can't offer them a seat without being offended. But at the same time, sometimes it's nice for someone to open a door for you. And it's nice to let someone open a door for you, even if you don't think you need it, even if you don't believe in it, because it allows for them to keep doing that, for one day to them hold the door open for what will be their, you know, future wife or something. So I think we've got into a bit of a crisis here because we're shutting down any form of communication and connection, um, and then complaining that there isn't anyone to date and isn't anyone to speak to anymore. But you've kind of, yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a really 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 tricky one, because I personally have had a lot of issues and aggros in the street. I've had people, you know, like I've said, like following me home. I had someone try and break into my house, um and that was horrible. But at the same time, I can't be fully against people ever talking to people in the street, because if we stop communicating and we stop kind of letting people um kind of chat you up, then how else are we going to procreate and carry on this society? Because like, as you said, online dating is an absolute shambles. And I think we just need to teach each other like how to do things respectfully, how to just be better at chatting up people in today's society. Because yeah, it's going to be a real mess in about 20 years time.
Oh, yeah, it's difficult because men I mean, men and women have always inhabited very different universes, but of course there was an idea, I think there was a kernel of first wave feminism, or maybe it's a different wave, but I think there is an idea of like, is it possible to bring about a situation where, you know, men and women have mutual understanding, or they can inhabit the same universe, or that they have equality, right? So we're playing this game and everyone's playing by the same rules, everyone's inhabiting the same game. And so, you know, if a woman wants to become a CEO, she's playing on a level playing field with the man who's trying to become the CEO. And so for a lot of people that's an ideal. um Yet, despite all of that, I mean, there is this very fundamental emotional distinction, which is that, you know, as a man, I have never, and I will never be followed by a woman in any sort of threatening context. You know, that is a fundamental difference. And, you know, the idea that you can erase that through education, again, going back to this, like, the 1% problem of how many trans people are in bathrooms, how many men are following women. I'm not following women home, but I
Yeah.
know that all it takes is one guy to just make that his hobby, is like, he just wants to intimidate women. He wants to chat up, or he wants to catcall women, whatever. And I would put those, all these behaviors are in different categories, so I wouldn't just lump them all together. But I'm saying that, um, for 1,000 women to experience catcalling, all it takes is for one guy to do that 1,000 times. It doesn't mean that 1,000 guys are doing that, right?
Literally.
But despite that fact that I can say, well, it's not all men. Okay, I can say not all men are doing these behaviors, but the majority of women, or a sizable number, 30% or whatever the statistic is, it's like a sizable proportion of women are experiencing this, and then they're sharing it with other women. And even if as a woman you don't experience being followed home, you have a friend who experienced that. So and so
Mm.
it becomes a threat in your life. It becomes present in your life, even if you haven't experienced it. So that gap between men and women, the idea that you can eliminate that by educating men harder, I think is also a misconception, because, the
Yeah.
minority of men who are perpetrating those acts, they know it's wrong. They're doing it anyway. They don't care. I mean, we're always going to
Yeah.
have criminals in society, and they're always going to behave in antisocial ways, no matter how much nagging you impose upon the majority of men. That's not going
Mm.
to change the majority of men. I think there's there is also an unintended consequence, which is that when um, I think when men who feel like they have done nothing wrong are continuously placed under suspicion of, well, the reason why rape happens is
Mm.
because of you. And it's like, well, I didn't do anything. And it's like, well, no, you need to step up and do more to X, Y, and Z. And it's like there's a disconnect where those men, I think, start to become very resentful, and it becomes like an
Yes.
oppositional culture, like the incel thing. I
Mm.
think has something to do with that. Now, is the solution then that you just say, okay, Ben, you do whatever, you don't have to, you have no responsibility anymore, whatever. I mean, I do think that I'm in favor of holding people to high standards. I mean, and I guess the question is like, which standards should we be holding people to? But I think there's a way to square that circle, which is I think that people should be encouraged as much as possible, and really women, to investigate what they want in a man, and to stick by that as much as possible. And that's going to be different for different women. It's like some women are going to be like,
Mm.
I want someone who's just extremely educated and professional and has these qualifications. Other women are like, no, I want someone who's like crazy and spontaneous and adventurous and weird. So there's going to be different preferences, but um, I think that it is ultimately for good that people have those very high standards. And like what you're talking about with celibacy is that, um, you know, if people have their high standards, I mean, specifically women have high standards, and they stick to that, and they say, you know what, I'm looking for a partner like this. I mean, it is difficult. That does require that you can't be with somebody at all. There's going to be periods where you are alone. But I think accepting that and embracing that and saying like that is the price of whatever, however you define that, success, happiness, contentment, fulfillment, whatever. I think that ultimately produces better outcomes than.
Mm.
And so I think that's how I conceive of it. Not so much as like, well, men are bad and men are not good enough and men need to step up. No, it's like if men don't want to step up, if men want to remain whatever they want to do, like like when you talked about, you said like we need, as a culture, as a society, we need to be chatting up more. And it's like, well, I think probably people would benefit if they were riskier emotionally, if they took emotional and social risks and put themselves out there. I think they would benefit. But at the same time, um, when I hear people say like we as a society need to become more X, Y, or Z, especially with social stuff, it's like, well, how do you? Is it like you nag people more to do that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know that there is an intervention other than like, you take away the internet and then people are forced to interact with each other. I mean, that's, I think, what a lot of the attitude is with children and phones is like we have to take away these
Mm.
phones from these kids. Um, my response to that is like I'm totally okay with a school because I think it's a little bit different in America versus the UK, like how the education system works. But I think it's totally okay if a school says, in this school, we don't have phones. We have person to person interactions. We write with pen and paper. It is what it is. Okay. I'm totally fine with that. And if parents want to send their kids to that school, I think that's totally fine. I think that sometimes um, we're a little bit too hyper focused on the phones in like a monocausal way, in a one dimensional way.
Yeah.
And I think that it loses sight of a larger process that's going on with technology and with society and with sociality is that and sometimes people talk about social trust and I had Alex Narasta on and he kind of he's a skeptic. He's like, social trust is this very ambiguous thing. Nobody knows what it really means. It's very hard to measure. So there's a lot of things people can just make up about it. But I do think that there is a larger question about authority and culture is that if you or I stepped into a space and it was like a conference specifically made for us, like we've made it, we're successful writers, and it's a conference and it's all of our fans are there. And it's people who read us and who understand us and like what we have to say, and we're on the same page. And people come out, we'd probably be more social than average, right? We'd probably be more
Mm.
open to interacting with people. If, on the other hand, you're at some conference that's like you're there in a disguise, you're wearing your fake mustache and your glasses and whatever, no one recognizes you, but it's like a hate fest. It's like people who are there to hate on you, you'd probably be less sociable. And the thing about modern society is that in any given context, we don't know where we are. We don't know if we're in the love fest. We don't know if we're in the hate fest because the amount of assumptions that you can make about people's values and their culture and their religion is decreasing and when I say diversity, I don't just mean racial diversity or sexual diversity, but ideological diversity and polarization, the intensity of the disagreements that people have with each other about fundamental issues. Questions in the past that would have been implicitly agreed upon. I mean, this is really interesting in American electoral history. I mean, we say that we're very polarized, and in some senses, that is true. But geographically, in America, it used to be that you would look at a particular state and it would be like 80% of people in that state would vote one way or they'd vote another way. And there wasn't
Mhm.
this big rural city divide. It was just like, yeah, I live in Alabama. We vote this way in Alabama. Now it's very different. People in cities are very Democrat. People in rural areas are very Republican. Um, so that the nature of the polarization has shifted to the point now where if you looked at a map of voting patterns in America 60 years ago, it would kind of look like a quilt, with you have this
Mm.
patch of red and this patch of blue. And now it looks less like a quilt and it looks like a teenager's face with acne on it. It's just like dot 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 of it's all mixed together. And so like sometimes people say like, well, Americans can't get along, so let's just divide the country. There'll be a Republican country and a Democrat country. You could have probably done that 60 years ago. You can't do that anymore because the geographic nature of it is like I would almost say it's like airport culture. Like there
Mm.
is in America, whether you're in New York or Los Angeles or Miami, those those are like three very different cities, but even there, those three cities are much more similar to each other today than they ever were before. That you just fly from one city to another, and it's all just kind of like one urban culture. Whereas 60
Mm.
years ago, 100 years ago, there were very distinct differences between Chicago and Boston and New York and things like that. So like that development um, of the intensification of ideological diversity, and I think kind of the collapse of religion and Christianity as a norm creates a lot of social anxiety. And people today
Mm.
that we identify as like we'd say, oh, you don't get out of the house, you don't talk to people, you don't chat up people in the street. I don't think that it's actually that people have become more introverted at the deepest level, because I think there are like, obviously some people are introverts, some people are extroverts, but I think
Yeah.
that if you take an introvert and you put them in a safe space where they feel like that there are implicit assumptions that they can make without offending people, I think they behave a lot differently than if you put them in a space
Yeah.
where they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I
So I
think it's
think
a
that's a big
confidence
part of it.
it's a confidence thing in terms of the fact that they aren't a lot of people aren't confident whether they are in a safe space or not. And that's the problem. It's that if you could if you don't have the confidence to speak out because you don't know what's going to happen, that's where the issues come into play. And I think if we can build confidence in people by teaching women also, so this is like I'm not obviously I'm not being like too blah, but if one of the things that could help is teaching teaching not necessarily women but people in general to be better at communicating and not as aggressive in shutting people down, but also the other side is teaching people to deal with rejection better, to deal with being in situations where, you know, I guess not objection handling, but kind of almost like having that kind of being being better in unsafe spaces, being better in new places, being more uh okay to kind of navigate these hard conversations. I think the more we have knowledge on the psychology of human interaction, um, the better. Because if you're confident to speak out, knowing that if you do get rejected, you can handle the rejection and you can walk away, but also knowing that when you do speak out, the person you're speaking to has the emotional maturity to be able to have a real conversation with you and not lash out or make you feel a certain way. I think that is kind of an education in conversation is what we need. It's not kind of like men need to step up or women need to do this. It's more just we all need to learn more about who who humans are and how humans work. And also the rules have changed, the game changed. Like the way you would chat someone up back 50 years ago is not the same way you would chat someone up now. And there are micro shifts in psychology and ways that you can kind of chat someone up in the street that would be more successful. But I don't know whether people are talking about those ways or know of them as much, because a lot of dating advice right now is very much kind of, well, I get, yeah, I don't even know. Sometimes I I kind of go off on different tangents, so I'm kind of like coming up with the thought process as I speak. But uh I definitely think that it, the more we learn about ourselves and learn about why am I offended when someone does that? Why is that actually offending me? Because the actual act isn't offensive. Why am I offended that someone has offered me a seat? Because actually that's actually quite a nice thing to do. Like if I start to decipher why I'm annoyed, you might actually then remove that annoyance or find a way to channel it into something different. And so I think the more people discover about themselves rather than trying to work out other people, the better. Because that's where the because I think you're having these conversations with friends or family or anyone really, and we all get, for want of a better word, triggered. um and actually, if you start to understand your own limiting beliefs and your own kind of triggers and your own X, Y, and Z, the less likely you are to get triggered, less likely you are to be offended, and the better conversation is, because you actually be able to listen to what someone's saying. And I think that's what drew me to your post in the first place, is that I think I can't remember what one I read first, but I was reading it and I was getting triggered. I was like, "Ah, ah." But then I was like, "Oh, oh, that's okay, but what why is that offended me?" I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, that's actually a fair point." Oh, and then it made me think, but then I thought, I don't know, like, and then now I've started doing it more often, just trying to challenge my own perceptions, challenge my own beliefs, challenge the things that I think I know about myself or I think I know about society, because I don't know anything. I'm still learning at life. And if you stay in your bubble, in your safe space, you'll never step outside and you'll never learn or grow and meet people that you actually want to spend the rest of your lives with, because yeah uh, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think it is fear. I think that when you see something that triggers you, the underlying emotion underneath, maybe there's anger or there's disgust, but I think it's really fear. It's this person wants to hurt me, or maybe it's the fear of, when you're challenged, it's the fear of losing your beliefs and then losing your identity. Because if I don't believe the things that I believe anymore, who even am I? Because
Mm,
our self conception is itself a belief. Like, I believe I am X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, if you
yeah.
remove those beliefs, like, I am an American, I am a proud American, I am a Christian, I am a man, I am all these things. And this is what it means to, like, so some people would be like, being a Christian means that you engage in spiritual warfare against the demonic left. And then other people will be like, no, being a Christian means that you turn the other cheek and you invite in the stranger, and you are non-judgmental and you are unconditionally loving. Very different conceptions of what it means to be a Christian or a man or an American. And so ultimately,
Mm,
our identity, which is the only thing we have, like, at the end of the day, you can lose material possessions, and even that is an identity, right? So it's like, I believe I am a rich person, I believe I have
mm,
this circle of friends who like me because we all have sports cars, and we all go to the same fancy parties. I mean, I was speaking to this woman from Miami, and she's just saying, like, yeah, to get in the club, it's like $300 a night to get into certain clubs in Miami. And then you
well,
have a circle of friends who can afford that, because obviously not everyone can afford that. And so your entire conception of your social circle is based on that. So ultimately, identity is about beliefs. And when you encounter a belief or an argument that challenges, these fundamental beliefs, challenges your identity, then there is a fear that very quickly, like, no one wants to be afraid, no one likes being afraid. I mean, I guess it's an interesting thing, like, horror movies allow us to be afraid in a safe way. It's kind of like, we have this term
mm,
safe horny, which is like, okay, I'm horny posting, but it's in a totally politically acceptable way. It's, no one could accuse me of being perverted, because it's just like
yeah,
it's like the most it's like a feminist kind of, like, I was reading about this thing about men being like, oh, I just want a woman who's like taller and stronger than me and she can dominate me. And it's like, okay,
yeah,
well, obviously no one's going to be really offended by you saying that. Like, because if you were to say the opposite, like, I want someone who's really small and submissive, then people think you're creepy, right? So this is a way that people
yeah,
can have that a safe expression of
safe,
sexuality.
yeah.
I think horror movies are a similar form of catharsis, where you're able to be afraid, but it's in a way that really doesn't threaten your identity at all. Whereas if you're encountering
Mm,
ideas that challenge you, then that's threatening in a very it's very scary in a personal way. And so that fear gets transmuted into anger, and people respond violently. And what you're saying about, that there is a benefit to being aware of your fear and that desire to protect yourself from change, from challenges, because you want to stay the same. But that's kind of a prison, because you're keeping yourself small. You're keeping yourself in
mm,
this almost infantile or adolescent form. And if you want to grow and you want to become more expansive, and you want to become better, then you do have to confront that fear, and you have to find ways that to overcome that. And that's it's not the it's not necessarily the other person with the different ideas who is um, generating that fear. That fear is generated from within, and it's generated to
Mm,
protect you from that person. But if you to be, I think it's actually more powerful if you can look at people who disagree with you or who are even trying to be threatening to you, and to say, I'm not going to be threatened by you. I'm not going to be afraid of you and your ideas, and I'm really going to think through this because I have the confidence in myself as a person that I can be exposed to something that's, dirty or dangerous or whatever, and it doesn't, because there's one of my favorite quotes in the Bible is Jesus says, it's not what goes in with you that goes into you that makes you sin, it's what comes out of you. And so he's kind of
mm,
saying that in reference to, like, well, he was hanging out with tax collectors and prostitutes and all these people, and they say, oh, you're validating that sin. He's saying, no, it's not the people I surround myself with or the experiences that I observe, or it's what comes out of me. It's how I react to that. Do I react to that by indulging in it or encouraging it or whatever? And or is my time spent with these people actually for the purpose of turning their lives around and encouraging them and getting them on the right path? So that's like kind of the ultimate God level perspective, is to be like, I'm going to be able to engage with other people who disagree with me in a way where I'm not afraid of them, and I'm not trying to defend myself,
mm,
and I'm not threatened. And I think that is ultimately a very powerful position to be in, and people are attracted to that. And when people see somebody who is can has that like level of stoicism and emotional control, that I think that actually makes you a much better debater than somebody who
mm.
where they're threatened and they just start name calling and they start freaking out and they shut
Yeah.
down. And you see, I mean, people get violent. People, if it wasn't over the internet, so the people are like throwing chairs at each other. I think that's kind of like civilization rests upon our ability collectively to demonstrate that kind of behavior of I'm going
Mm.
to be open to new things, and have confidence. And so I think it's beautiful what you're expressing, and I really appreciate that you read the things that I was reading, and they were a little bit. They call it scaring the hose. I think that's the slang term for it. Is like, I put out stuff that is weird and is offensive, but it's all done in a spirit of play, and it's all done
Mm.
really to invite people to have an opportunity to say, yes, you could take this as threatening, you could take this as scary, but you could also take it as, like, it's kind of like how clowns can be funny and they can be scary, and there's kind of like this
Yeah.
ambiguity there. And so I'm like playing with these ideas in a way that people are like, are you joking, is this serious, do you actually believe in this? And I'm saying, well, yes, I do, but I want to present it in a way that, first of all, we have to have fun, because if we're not having fun, what's the point of it? um,
I think that's what you said. I think I quoted you because you said something about like kind of y- y- it was something to do with being bored and how like something that scares you is way more engaging and entertaining to read. So why not put it in that kind of way? And I think what you were saying about kind of fear is very true because there was like a comment on I can't remember which post you'd done, but there was a comment and this guy just kept repeating himself, but it was really strange because he was like referencing his own definition of a word that no one else was saying. And it was interesting to look at because everything is a language issue. Everything is kind of my definition of this word is different to your definition of this word, but because we're using the same word, we're always going to keep arguing. But actually, if we stop using that word and we actually use a different word and find like the word that we actually mean, we might realize that we're not saying the same thing and therefore we don't need to argue. Because I think what was interesting about the whole Charlie Kirk thing, like coming from someone who was really impartial, because I was like, I don't know what the fuck's going on here. Um, was to see two sides of very, obviously we're talking about the very ends of society, and that they're shouting the loudest, but they're not necessarily in the majority, as we've mentioned. But seeing someone very far right and someone very far left, and they sound the same. They're speaking about each other in the same way, and when you try and explain that to them, they go, "No, it's not the same because of this." But then you speak to that person, they say, "Well, it's not the same because of this." And I'm like, "Guys, you're both scared shitless out of each other." And actually, if you were able to see that you kind of, you have the same problem, like you're arguing over language and over definitions, and over, you're picking up on the tiniest thing that someone said and going full pelt on that kind of argument, and forgetting all the, they've said 10 things that you actually agree with, but you've kind of picked on the fact that they use the word fascism. And so now you're going to go on a rant about fascism, whereas you're actually ignoring the fact that they just said, "I'm really scared because of this and this and this." And so, but I think that that runs through relationships, in marriages, in families. Like, it is literally, language is our biggest problem. It's so, we can now write and read and talk to each other, but still we'd have no idea what each other is fucking saying half the time. Like, and if you're having my one of my biggest in argument moments is when I can go, "Oh wait, we're arguing different points here. Let's just pause and let me just get, what's your definition of this word? What is let's just double check. Oh no, we're talking about two different things. Let's just agree that we're on the same page for that. And now let's discuss this other thing because we're getting kind of confused." But it's really hard to decipher that in the moment, and to realize that you're arguing about two different problems. um and also to kind of really go, you know what do you actually mean when you use this word? Because I use the word hate a lot, and I actually don't mean hate, of course. Like, I use the word hate when I'm talking about strong cheese, but like, I actually mean it in the same way that someone else says I hate Jews. You know what I mean? It's completely different levels of hate. So I think it's really important when you're talking to someone, and when you're having a bit of a meltdown, to go, right, you've used that word, I'm triggered. Let me just double check that you mean what you said. But um yeah, anyway.
This has been a great conversation. I know we've gone over an hour and a half on my latest counter here. So I want to give you an opportunity at the end here to, last word. If you have anything you want to shout out, talk about projects you're working on, things you're thinking about, stuff we didn't covered, the floor is yours.
I'm trying to think, because we feel like we've ran through a large cross section of subjects, and I can sometimes lose track of points I'm making. So, but I guess to talk about anything I'm working on at the moment is, I am personally, I really struggle with finishing things. I have lots of ideas. I'm always starting and starting and starting, and I really fail at kind of rounding things off and finishing. I think you said in one article, you were like, "I'm looking at you procrastinators," and I felt like, "Oh my god, he's talking to me." So one of the things I'm working on is kind of workflows for people who have lots of ideas, but really struggle with finishing them. Um, Different kind of, I work a lot with AI, in terms of interview. I have a lot of interview prompts. I get it to interview me a lot, to kind of extrapolate my viewpoints, and help me see different ways of seeing things. So I guess I'm trying to build a system of how to be a better human using AI, with a series of different interview prompts, a series of different, you know, exercises that people can do. But I'm only doing that because I quit my job and I need to make some money somehow. So, and I realized that I'm actually quite good at talking to AI because I did the crunch the numbers and I've done probably about 1,000 to 1,500 hours with AI systems, and because of my time working with people and talking to human people, I seem to be able to talk to a machine quite well, which is a strange skill that I never thought would be a thing. So yeah, I guess if anyone is interested in becoming a better person, but they don't have like the money to pay for all these like life coaches and courses, and also they just like doing things on their own and working things out, then give me a little kind of DM and maybe I'll send you some fun stuff. I guess that's what I'm kind of doing at the moment. And also just getting better at writing and trying to talk to different people and just see how we can kind of have fun conversations and keep creating and keep inspiring each other and keep putting out good, well researched information into the world, which is currently being flooded with people who like just don't put any effort into any of the content they're creating, which just blows my mind. But yeah, I guess that's what I'm working on at the moment. I don't know. What are you working on at the moment?
I have an article on World War II that's sitting on my desk. It's completed, but I haven't. Whenever I come to the end of an article, I've spent 20 hours on something, and then it's like I have to hit that publish button or the schedule button. And the last thing I do is I always email articles to myself because I don't trust Substack 100%. Just
Mm,
in terms of like technical issues, sometimes like you might hit publish and then it's like, oh, actually it didn't save because the internet was whatever. So it's like weird things like that. So the last thing I do is I always email it to myself. And when I email it to myself, I have like a format. I have an Excel document where I put in, here's the title, here's the word count, here's the day, and then I calculate like, okay, what is my daily word count? What is my yearly word count? What are all these things? So I have all these graphs that auto populate for me that show me, here's how you're doing, here's how many words you published this week, and it shows me whether
mm,
I'm doing more or less, and it's kind of overwhelming. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's a good way to keep track of what I'm doing and hold myself to a standard. But I get to that point a lot of times, and I feel this anxiety of like, okay, I think this is done. I think I could publish this. I think this article is good. But like, what if it's not? What if I should actually go back and redo it? Or what if like
mm,
it's fundamentally flawed in some way? And it's easier to procrastinate. It's easier to defer and to be like, I'm just going to leave that in the drafts folder. And now I have 70 drafts in my folder. So it's pretty insane, and it's pretty hard to go. It's emotionally difficult for me to go through those and look at them and be like, okay, I'm going to like, because the drafts folder to me represents, here are ideas that I think are worth talking about, but I didn't feel confident enough to go all the way with this. And so there is some problem. There's some missing knowledge, or I'm anticipating some kind of critique, or people won't like it, or like, and I have that problem a lot with articles where I'm thinking maybe about a specific person or a type of person who will read it and who will think, oh, this is trash. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This is terrible. This guy's a goofy clown, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I I do fear that. Even now, after like having gone through this process 400 times of writing something,
mm,
publishing it, and so I put out 400 articles, and it's like, but I'm still afraid. And as I talk to people, I mean, I think for me this is like therapy, because every time I talk to people, as a person, I mean, people are really nice. People are really 99% of the time people are just respectful and they're welcoming and they're encouraging. Um, but I still have this sense of like, I want to be good enough and I want to be liked and I want. I'm always afraid that like of making the wrong impression and missing it. I mean, I've had a few things where it's like, oh, if you talk to someone really famous and you don't hook them in, you don't seduce them, it's almost like dating in a way. It's like, okay, there's someone I really like and I want them to like me back. And so I have to be perfect for that person because if I'm not, they're going to dismiss me and never give me a second look because they don't have time to be dealing with random like small little creators or whatever. So I have to. There's all that psychological pressure. So that's like the meta answer to the question of what am I working on in the grander scheme is, um, I think that that aspect of fear, how it manifests in my life, is my greatest challenge, and that really is my goal. Is like this is you know sharing my thoughts is it's the most difficult thing for me. I know other people would be like, no, that can't be true because you're so much more open about what you think about than the average person. It's like, okay, but you don't understand how many years I spent in silence just thinking things to myself and never sharing them with people because I was afraid to do
Mm,
so. And so that's still, on a daily basis, something that I struggle with. Um, so yeah, I guess that's I guess I have this article on World War II, which I'm like, oh my gosh, I've put so many hours into this. No one, because whatever I know that what my audience likes is they like I have to talk about something political that's in the news. If I do that,
mm,
I'll get like likes and comments and I'll get positive feedback from people to be like, oh, yeah, I got some new subscribers. And if I talk about something that, like, the more distance it is from that topic, like, oh, it's about history, it's about like the logistics of transportation in a war that happened 80 years ago, then I know. And so there's like this sense of what would you call that? Like a uh, anticipatory sense of loss, like
yeah,
humiliation. Like, oh, I put so much work into this, and no one appreciates it, no one likes it. And I guess
yeah.
it kind of makes me angry too. Like, I deserve people loving me because I'm trying so hard. And
Yeah,
vocalizing that obviously is very cathartic for me because having those feelings in my head is really stressful. But when I express them, when I say, I'm afraid of this, then I realize, oh, I don't need to be afraid of that. And it makes me feel a lot
yeah,
better. So thank you for asking
yeah.
that.
No, I get I'm glad I asked because I really, really relate to everything you're saying. And I think it's really comforting to hear because like you've written like over 400 articles and I have written three. But that doesn't mean I haven't written. It means that I have I had so many ideas, so many drafts, and so many times where I didn't feel confident to write, and I've only managed to kind of do three at the moment, despite like I spend so much time writing, and then I just abandon something because I just don't think it's good enough. But it's really like interesting to hear what you say because I think it's important that people kind of are aware that that feeling doesn't go away. That kind of is this good enough? Will people like it? Um, doesn't go away. But that's why I guess you almost have to kind of have the mindset of one for me, one for them kind of thing. Like, if you want to write it, you write it if your subscribers know you well enough and are mature enough, they should be mature enough to go, this one's not for me. And this is what I think I said, like I think before we started kind of the proper interview is that like, we need to start like we need to start being better consumers and we need to be able to go, this one's not for me. I'm just gonna leave this one. But I'm not gonna comment and say, I don't like this article. Why don't you write about this? We just go, this one's not for me. But also as a creator, we need to go, not every post is gonna get you know, the engagement and attention that we want. And also, most of the time, the ones that we really, really care about and that we put our heart and soul in aren't the ones that people care about. But you can't spend your life just doing what's current in the news, because there are going to be people who stumbled across this kind of article on World War II, and they were like, "Oh my god, this is so in depth. This is so amazing. I'm so surprised that I found this." And I guess that's all that matters. And I think the beautiful thing about Substack, even though people unsubscribe like nobody's business, you can post, you can just keep posting. And so what if one of your articles gets dramatically less kind of engagement, as long as it got one like and one comment, like as long as somebody was like, nice job, that's genuinely all that matters. And I think that managing expectations and uh not chasing, I'd say that the most transformative thing for me to ever happen on Substack was not to get a semi-viral note. It was the days after the semi-viral note where my engagement went to near zero. That's what changed me. That's what I spent the days like, who am I without these likes? What am I gonna do? I'm irrelevant now. I've missed my chance. And then I kind of gone, or you just carry on posting and just get the fuck over it, and it'll happen again or it won't. But I think that's why I've been trying to work on my, I wanted to call it "Finish Him," but it's actually trademarked from Mortal Kombat and stuff. So, but yeah, it's very much about kind of those, working on those mindsets of publishing and the post-publish fear. Uh, and I always want to go back and edit. I edit the hell out of my posts, my three posts. I change the titles all the time. I change the thumbnails all the time. I go back and do rewrites to it. And now I'm telling myself I'm not once I publish it, I'm not allowed to rewrite the article. I can change the title because I like to A/B check the titles, because who knows anymore about titles and thumbnails? Like, it's all a bit of a minefield. But kind of telling myself that, like, if you want it to be better, then write another article and do that one better. Like, I even have started putting it through a really comprehensive review prompt, which rates it on different things and gives me different feedback. And I do it after I've posted it, because I think there's a psychological thing that happens when you're happy with something in the moment. You should be happy with it in the moment, and there's a reason why you're happy with it in the moment. And then only after the fact, when you find out that you could have done better, you should be aware of it after the fact. Because if you do it beforehand, you never learn the lesson because you're constantly tweaking. Whereas if you publish and then go, oh, yeah, I should have done that, there's something in your brain that then goes, make let me make sure that doesn't happen again, rather than let me never post until it's ready. So I think that that's what I'm trying to do in my fourth major publication, is just be happy with what you're posting as you post it, publish no matter what, even if it's 70-80% ready, and then try and do better next time. um and and then also, what was I just about to say that has completely ran from my mind? Oh yeah, it's just that because also you are in a different position to me, because you have a large following, you have a true idea of who your kind of reader is. So therefore you're plagued with that demon of, I know who's reading this and I know what they expect from me. But like, that doesn't mean that that's all you ever can be or all you ever will be. And you should be allowed to grow as a creator, because if the people who follow you care enough about your work, they care enough about keeping you feeling sustained and you feeling happy and involved enough that you want to spend 20 hours on an article. Because if you keep pumping out things that you don't want to do, you'll lose that kind of joy. So as someone with like a small following, I don't have to worry about that too much. But and so I'm having to my my niche is non-existent. Like my next, I think I just did one about taste and money and spirituality. My next two posts are, one is about Timu and about the gamification of Timu and how the tactics, the selling tactics that they involve, and how like everyone's mother-in-law really needs to understand the psychology of what's happening to them when they click onto Timu and Sheen, because I it's absolutely shocking. Like, I don't even feel bad for the people who are buying from Temu anymore, because I've seen the dark side of it and it's horrendous. Anyway, that's a like a investigative journalist piece on Temu, and then the other one is about the rise of feminine marketing and how we, you know, the way that marketing has moved to this kind of lifestyle. I made 10 grand in my sleep, and here's how you can do it too with two posts a day. Like, it's just like crazy. Um, which is complete, I feel like that's completely different kind of things. And there's loads of different drafts that haven't been done, but I'm gonna try and post more and write more and use my stuff, because hopefully one day I can get to 400 articles.
Keep doing it, and you'll eventually get there. But
Mm.
I think you have some good advice for people. So definitely, we'll be putting this one up, and I'll be linking your page, and people can go check that out. I really appreciate your time. This is a good one.
It's like half 12 in the UK. It's like 12 half 12
I'm
p.m.
really grateful you gave me the time. I know I do this for about an hour. We went double that, but no, it was great, and definitely I'm just now actually getting uh basically the interviews I started doing with people last year. I'm starting to come back around now this year and do follow ups with people. So, you know, I'm kind of slow at that, but I'm sure as things progress, it'll be exciting to see where you go, and we'll check back in at some point.
I think for me, I've never done anything like this before. I I've never had like a recorded uh, interview, or even done an interview properly at all. So I think it took me a while to kind of get into the swing of things and kind of work out how to think and speak at the exact same time, which is interesting. So, but it's been really fun, and I think I'm really impressed also at your ability to um go almost on a tangent, but you thread out from a conversation, but then you always bring it back to where you where you branched off from, which is so impressive. Because I think a lot of people, well, me personally, I can veer off, but if someone does veer off, I am very good at saying, oh, this is what we were talking about. But if it's me, I can't for the life of me. So I think I'm very, very incredibly impressed at your ability to expand a thought process, but then bring it back. But that's probably because you write a lot of articles, and that's literally the entire thing, is training that kind of running along, expanding out, and then kind of doing that conclusion and kind of tying it all together, which is really interesting.
I appreciate that. That's what I try to do. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that, because I don't often get to speak with people who are intelligent, open minded, and willing to have a conversation. Like you said, most people don't do this normally, and so when I ask people to
Mhm.
do it, it's kind of a strange request, but I think we bear with it, and something cool comes out of it. So definitely, my door is open. I'd like to do this again at some point, and I don't know. We touched a little bit on social media. One of the ideas I had, I didn't express during this conversation, was like, eventually, and I think this is kind of also about me just getting a bigger audience, is like I would love it. I would love to start conversations between people, and I have done this to an extent, but I'd like to do more of it. Is I'd like to have conversations with people and use that as a jumping point for other people that I've spoken with to have conversations with each other. So that's I mean
Mm.
that's how you get network effects, and that's how I think you get a lot of creativity coming from that. So that's something that I'm not there yet to manifest that as in the way that I'd like. I'm still growing, but yeah, it would be. I think that ethos, that idea, having conversations, normalizing that. We're not on the street, but we're gesturing toward chatting on the street. We're gesturing toward
Mm.
we can talk with people and it can be good and we don't have to be afraid. That general ethos is kind of what I'm trying to push in a subcultural way. Maybe I can't change the entire culture, but that's my goal.
Well, I think we're very aligned in that kind of goal. And I think that despite the fact that I'm like just a baby writer, I am an ideas person, and I am kind of, when I listen to someone, I do get sparks and I do go, oh, maybe we could do that, and maybe we could do that. And I am like a strategist. Like I do, I do brand strategy as a normal job, and I'm trying to start that as a freelancer, which, I guess if anybody wants me to do a brand audit and sort their social media strategy out, I love data. But I don't believe that you need a bigger following to get the where you want to be. And I think we should definitely talk about ways that we can get people talking and having hard conversations, and not even just having hard conversations. I think it's watching other people have hard conversations is as useful as having that conversation themselves. So I don't know whether there's a way of kind of connecting people and broadcasting it in maybe less metal bars, more kind of, I don't know, professionally type setups or whatever. But because you got to appeal, if you don't have the following, you got to appeal to the masses somehow. Um, and I think if you pimped up it a bit, I think there's a recipe there for something incredible that could then get you the following that you want, and then allow you to post absolutely anything you wanted. um, so I don't know. I think we could get you there, get that goal started.
I'm all for pimping. You had me. I'm all for that. I actually went to a studio in Toronto where it's exactly we were having that same conversation, which is a lot of these. I don't even know that. I think it was Josh Ciccarella. I think they were talking about. He's like very professional, and so that there's definitely something to that. I've actually done. I think it's in my nature to love doing things quick and dirty, and I love how writing allows me to disguise that fact. Like I can
Mm.
be in my boxers, like hunched over a computer and just like not care at all, and then produce something, and then
Yeah.
people project all of these images onto me. And it's not that like I'm not a hard person to find. Like I know people have commented a lot like, "Oh, you're a coward, you don't show your face." And I'm like, I
You're
don't
hiding your
yeah,
face.
I don't like have like a trademark. Like I don't it's not my profile picture, I guess. So um but I'm not like a hard person to find, but that just like the writing allows people to project all kinds of things onto me of like I'm whatever. If they love me, they can project good
Yeah.
things. If they hate me, they project bad things. But I like that I like that aspect of writing as opposed to. I mean, I like having conversations too, but to me, 99% of the value of the conversation is the other person. Having
Mm.
a a small 2-hour relationship with another person, to me, is valuable, and the and then the likes and the views. And I think like what you said about if you get one like, that's enough. That's hard for me to like believe that when it's writing, but it's really easy for
Yeah.
me to believe that when it's talking to a person. So I guess I don't think that. I think I'm a writer first, and I think the podcasting to me is actually like a little treat that I get. Like, oh,
Mm.
because I have this audience, I can leverage it to, to trick people into doing a podcast. But it's actually like a freedom for me, because normally when I'm writing, um, like I said, there is a lot of pressure, or there is it's very
Mm.
intense, and I feel like talking to
Mm.
someone, it's an opportunity to relax. It's an opportunity to have fun, and yeah,
And
I
you're not
am.
over analyzing.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're not over analyzing kind of I find that like I'm an actor by trade. I do TV, film, TV commercials currently a lot. So I have a setup because you have to tape your auditions, and sometimes you have to do auditions on Zoom and stuff. So along the years, I've kind of been upgrading my kit more and more. Um, and one of my selling points is the fact that I am an actor, and I am confident, and I have a brand and a look that is marketed across the world, well, into people's houses. I'm basically selling things to people. So when I started kind of thinking I wanted to do some content creation, I kind of was like felt pressured to do the video content and do the YouTube and do the Instagram and the curated, and I felt like too overwhelmed by the aesthetics of everything and the pressure to make everything look nice. So when I kind of discovered writing and discovered being able to, like you said, sit in my bed at like 2 a.m. just like and feeling like I didn't have to kind of put on a show, was really, really liberating. So I do know what you mean, but ultimately, it is something quite nice about. It's quite scary when you're talking to someone and it's recorded, and you don't know what's going to come out your mouth, and you can't second guess it, and you can't, oh, let me go back and rewrite that sentence, or let me go back and say, oh, I didn't mean to say that, can I say something different? um it's like there's times in this conversation where I've gone, oh, why did you say that, or you should have said this instead, or whatever. But you can't, you've got to move on with it, the conversation's gone, like get over it. And it's quite cathartic, and it's quite exciting. And I think that's what the world of podcasting was made on. And I think having when you're having conversations like we are, which are kind of quite controversial topics, politics and stuff like that, it's exciting because you don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what someone else is going to say, and it's not scripted. So I think that's what is beautiful. But then obviously, you have the podcast, which I don't know, people just I don't know what they're talking about half the time. So but that comes with everything, anyway. But yeah, I totally get what you mean about kind of it's like a little treat. Uh you're giving the editor in your brain a day off because you can't edit. You just have to vibe and chat. But yeah, uh,
I think we're
the
gonna.
conversation is gonna, yeah.
I think we're gonna have to leave it there, because I think we're
Yeah.
both running out of time. But Fia, this was
Yeah.
great. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Take care.
And
Bye bye.
good night.
All right.